All right, guys, so here we go for our next opportunity. Now, this one's going to be a little tricky, and I'm going to be very picky and selective with the tracks that I decide to make onto this album. This is probably deceivingly simple. The sound and the style that we're going for might not seem that hard to pull off, but I have a feeling that most of you are going to have a tough time with this because it is a very specific sound, and it has to be like 10 out of 10 in terms of its production value. Okay, so we are basically going for sleek, modern, futuristic corporate cues. Okay, now this sound can be in a few different areas. We have a few different genres that we can go to achieve this sound, but essentially you need to be putting in your head as you're composing a Mercedes car commercial, a high-end car commercial, which is showing off sleek design, a futuristic technology, a sort of higher end product model. Okay, that's what we're going for with this. We're not necessarily looking for just the, sort of family sedan, the kind of cheap one that's fun for the family to go take a road trip on. We're thinking, think of those car commercials where it's like, you see the attractive guy picking up the attractive girl, and it's the sleek, cutting edge, like it's a status symbol of that's what this car is going to be providing. So this needs to be sort of like, our tracks need to be kind of like that 14 karat gold quality that even just hearing your song should make somebody feel a little bit more like you got to sit up in your chair a little bit. You probably should put on a nicer suit or something, right? So it should have something that is high class, right? That's what we're really going for with this album. So this is for Library X, and they have a definite need because they've been bringing on new clients that deal with car advertisers, right? Car commercials, and they're going to need this kind of stuff moving forward into this year. I have personally gotten a Ford commercial with music like this, so I've had a personal experience that this kind of music does get placements, and that commercial aired for a long time. I think it was like 6 months, 9 months, and yep, I got paid actually every single time that commercial was airing. So it was actually a nice payout for me, and it can definitely land some great music or some great payouts and royalties for you as well. So let's go through these samples that I have. These references. I've created a YouTube playlist as usual. Now I have probably 3 different styles that I've included, but I really am going to focus on really just one of them. I think the first track that's included in here is the most important track and probably the most relevant sound that I really want to focus on. It doesn't mean that we don't want the other sounds included. We do want a sort of a wide array. I just couldn't find, honestly, a lot of great examples of this style of music that I found here. So I found maybe 1 or 2 that were like, okay, this is kind of what we're going for. And then everything else was, I like the other sounds as well, and I do want some of those other styles. But I want the majority of the album to be like track number 1 and track number 2. And I'm going to hit play on here and tell you why that is. So let's go with the first one here. Before we go into it, what are some of the adjectives that come out at you, right? It's clean, okay? All these sounds are very crisp, very clean. It's not really dirty, okay? There might be a little bit of a growl, a little bit of aggression in those low, bass synths or whatever, but they're mild, okay? It's a small amount of aggression that comes through just to help push it forward. But overall, this is just a very clean sound. Obviously, it has a sort of halftime kind of chill step, maybe even a little bit of a dubstep kind of a feel. Right, that's just, which is okay for this, okay? But this track still is moving forward, okay? So even though we're doing halftime with this style, we don't want to start having like slow, dragging, sleepy. That's one of the reasons why this is going to be tricky for a lot of you, is because even though it is a little bit more in the chill, relaxed, kind of down tempo, it can't be sleepy though. It still has to have that forward momentum, which is tricky. But you'll find here now that, the strings are kind of doing these eighth notes, dun, 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 and then you have the piano and all these other synths that are pushing this thing forward. That 16th note pulsating bass, that makes a big difference in pushing this track forwards, okay? So if you're gonna do a kind of a slower half-tempo beat like this, consider adding some 16th note elements in there to kind of help push it forward. It's gonna be one of those things you'll have to do something, right, to get that track to move forward. Those snares are awesome. They have that reverb, right? That little space in it. Lots of transitions, changes in this track. It's not looping the same thing over and over again. Obviously, you can tell that. The lead is very subtle. It's a bell you can almost barely hear, but it's there, adding a little bit of melodic interest. And again, we want to go with that. We don't want anything too abrasive and piercing and just jumping out of the speakers. Nice and chill, relaxed, subtle. Okay, all of this stuff needs to be subtle. Remember, we're talking about classiness. We're talking about sleekness, futuristic, modern design. None of that should be abrasive and coming at you and, you know, shocking you and completely jumping out of the speakers so intensely, okay? It should be nice and smooth. It's clean. It's high class, right? So just kind of keep that in your mind as you select your instruments. Nice spacey piano with a lot of reverb behind it. Sounds really good, okay? So even though it's a really high frequency piano, it's not abrasive. They've definitely smoothed out some of the high frequencies that could be piercing. So I want you to really pay attention to this first track. It's a really good example of where to go, okay? This is a really great sound. Also, number 2 is close behind it. So let's take a listen to what's going on there. So obviously this one doesn't have that sort of half chill step vibe. It's a little bit more kind of 4 on the floor. Dun, 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 you know, so it has just a different rhythmic vibe. But everything else, it's kind of doing the same thing. The one thing I want to make sure we don't get too much though, and this track has a little bit, I think too much, is the spacey pad sound. We don't want too much of that. A little bit of that can be great because it can add to atmosphere, but your track shouldn't be driven by a spacey pad sound that's just, you know, kind of meandering and sort of just dragging through the track. Yeah, bass piano probably is more what should be driving your track, and some cool buzz, beeping, plucking, subdued kind of synths, some arpeggiated synths, some cool sequenced ones. Maybe you can find some cool, and when I say subdued, I mean just like, you know, you might even want to almost like plucks or beeps that sound like they're underwater. You know, like you've kind of lost a lot of the high frequencies, and they just kind of really nice and mellow and chill, almost like it's like an underwater soundtrack. And that's kind of what the vibe you want to go for, to make sure you're not having that abrasive thing happening. There's a sense of wonder, curiosity, again, status. That's kind of all going on in these sort of, and this track's probably more curiosity and wonder. The first one had a little bit more status to it, but obviously technology is a big part of it. And if you guys have not paid attention, what are most cars coming out with? Cool, new, awesome technology. And they're gonna probably wanna show that off in the form of a car commercial. So we're gonna make sure that we have music that can sort of complement that feature of all these cars that are coming out right now. So we wanna make sure we don't miss out on that sense of technology. Probably even a little bit of romance in there too, right? You can kind of have a little bit of a love story that could be woven into this song too. So those are all ideas, some vibes to go for. Now, the next style that that I think could be appropriate is chill step. And if you guys have not heard of chill step or know what it is, let me introduce to you what it is real quick here. Got that half-tempo cool drum thing going on. It's very spacey. There's a lot of sampled vocals. You can do sampled vocals. Of course, we're looking for instrumental tracks, and if you're going to do something with sampled vocals, just obviously make sure in one of your alt mixes you take those out, because they might want to have one without those alt mixes, those vocals. And also be prepared that perhaps they might request that maybe you also make an alternate lead that's not the vocals. Just be aware of that. That might be something that's requested of you if your track is accepted. So it's just something that, you know, it happens in this business. Sometimes they say, we love the track, we just don't like the vocals. Can we just put a different lead on top of there? And you might have to go and, you know, track one. You can record one now, or you can just wait until you get accepted, and if it's requested of you, then do it. But just one of the things that happen. It's very, you know, a sense of awe. You know, it's kind of mystical. It's kind of futuristic, right? It's got these really cool things. But I definitely, when I hear this kind of music, this is definitely licensable, and this is definitely giving me a sense of like a sleek, nice, futuristic design of a car. Okay, so that's kind of the vibe I'm going for with this sound. Big bass drops like that, really, really popular with this style. You know, a nice 808 bass drop is really, really good. One thing I will caution you though, even though it's included in some of these references, is don't get so heavy on those bass step wobbles. You hear it in this track, wob, 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 because that's the one thing, like when you hear this track's from 2011 actually. I don't know if you can see that down here, but this is a 2011 track. Without those dubstep wobbles, you probably wouldn't know if this was made this year or 7 years ago. But when those dubstep wobbles come in, it feels dated, right? Because dubstep's out. It's been out for quite a few years now. So you don't want to have something that can be a little bit more pigeonholed into one sort of fad or style. This is part of the master course when I taught you guys about being timeless with your productions. So even though some of these have that dubstep wob, 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 that wobble thing, don't include so much of that in yours. Maybe a little bit here and there or something, but not, it shouldn't be a driving force at all in your track, because it will sound dated and you won't have futuristic uses. We want this album to be able to be used for 5 years, 10 years into the future. Okay, and so if you have a very dated specific thing that happened in 2013 and was really popular then, or 2011 here, you might get sad on the sidelines because it feels old. Okay, so just be aware of that. Don't put so much of that in your track. Just have much more of a, you can still have a bass element or something that's kind of, you know, but have a little bit more of a pulsating bass or something, but nothing that's very specific to one style of music that might have been already past and its heyday is over. Piano, right? And it's got this cool vocal sample kind of doing it. So same elements kind of you're going to hear on a lot of these tracks. So you want to just get used to, you know, starting right now, picking out some great sounding instruments that you feel would be appropriate for this genre. All right, and you guys have all heard the original song of this, but this is a remix, chill step version. Optimism, futuristic, right? You guys are feeling that. Wonder, there's a lot of that going on as well. This one has maybe a little bit too much of that kind of like childlike wonder, so we probably want to stay a little bit away from that. But I still like the fact that this is a little bit more upbeat and, you know, a little bit higher tempo. So I wanted to give you this as an example. Clean. Listen to everything in this track. Everything is super clean, okay? Nothing dirty. Nothing is clunky. The kick is snappy. The snares are snappy. All the little plucks. It's almost like everything's like pinpricks, right? Kind of really coming at you very clean, okay? And a lot of times the snare, though, will have that nice reverb tail to give it some space. Okay, listen to these drums. So this snare part, you'll hear every fourth one, there's a little accent snare, and you have that reverb, okay? And then right before most snares, you hear a little reverse sound, right? These are these tiny little things that will make your track stand out, and it'll sound really cool, real futuristic. Those nice little, you know, those kind of like trap snare fills, but really clean, okay? Nothing clunky, really clean. That's what you got to go for. I'd like to make myself believe that planet Earth turns. Play that part again. You know, there's a sense of like imagining the future, imagining what's possible that's also included in the style. So it's really, really cool. Very licensable. What was this one? Let's see. Clean. Listen to the cleanliness of all this. It's a very classic chill step kind of a beat. So it has some percussion, you know, kind of, I don't know what those sounds are. Some of them are kind of like shakers, or some of them are maybe some kind of messed up edited snare hits or something. But there's a little bit of space in the beat though. It's like, so there's some rests, some pauses. It's not always happening. Okay, so you want to let your track and your beat breathe a little bit in this genre, in this style. So that's something you should be paying attention to. You can put strings in your track, but they got to be up there, right? They got to sound great. They got to sound realistic, and they have to be adding to the track. They can't just be feeling like they're just thrown in there to add a little bit of a cinematic effect to it. It has to be just perfectly placed. This one's a little bit more minimal, stripped down, so you guys get an idea for that. Let's check out this one. So obviously, you know, this is not a TV film track, okay? So I don't want a 1.5-minute intro with no drums going on. That's not how you should be doing this, okay? This one is included because it doesn't have the chill step drums. It's not like the first one. It's kind of like its own unique version of a corporate track. So I wanted to just give this as an option, okay? But obviously, you need to follow the usual structures. Get right into the music, get right into something. If you're gonna have an intro, have an attention-grabbing intro or something that sets the mood right away. So if somebody's previewing your track, they know what they're gonna get once they continue on with your song. Now this part's definitely way too repetitive for me, but the vibe is right, okay? So you have this cool piano line, you have this kind of progressing melody going underneath it. Let's see if it gets a little bit more intense. Almost like hip-hop drums kind of back there, but not quite. Okay, so it's not a hip-hop track. We definitely don't want to do that. But these are obviously different than all the drums you've heard before on this playlist. A major ascending chord progression underneath. That's a really good thing to do. Cool. Let's see what the next one is. Too repetitive there for us. Let me show where the part where I liked. Remember, this is not a TV film track, so it's not structured how we need it. One thing I don't like about this is that that string that's probably already bothering you. We can't have that kind of stuff where you have like a 4-bar progression. You have the same note going through it with the string. So this one's much more repetitive than we need it to be. But again, just the style, the vibe of where it's going, you kind of get some ideas off of this, okay? The cleanliness of the drums, I like those a lot, so that's why I included that one. And this last one's actually like a playlist. It's I think it's like 30 minutes long or so, and there's a lot of different kind of songs on here, mostly in that chill step range. So I just want to include it in case you needed some more inspiration or some other ideas. So I'll just go through this quickly. I know there was one in particular that I really liked from this mix. I don't know if it's going to be able to play for me here. Now here's the tricky part too. And thanks for those that are still watching this. Some of these can have a sense of melancholy and sadness. Okay, so this one has a little bit of melancholy and sadness to it. We don't want melancholy and sadness with our tracks. Okay, so that's why it's a fine line. It was really hard for me to even come up with the tracks that I did for this. So that's why these are probably more in the sort of if you just want to get inspired, maybe go for these. But I don't want you to necessarily follow the ones that sound kind of sad in this mix, because car commercials are not sad. Like, they don't want you getting bummed out or something, or being retrospective or reflective about something sad that happened or a sad memory. You want to be optimistic. You want to feel, you know, sleek. You want to feel futuristic. You want to feel like you're on the cutting edge of technology, right? So none of those things have anything to do with sadness or melancholy, okay? So just make sure that as you're going into this style, it's very tempting to try to do these kind of sad minor progressions and get really dramatic with it. You're going in the wrong direction if that's happening, okay? You got to go for the optimism, the futuristic, the curiosity, the wonder, okay? You got to go through to the other side of the emotional spectrum with this style. And this style, this chill step kind of corporate thing we're doing here, it can go in both directions very quickly. Like, it's really actually kind of easy to just slip into one way or the other. I've done some of this music and I know how easy that is. So just be careful with that. Try to keep it in the lane of everything that I've talked about before and all the terms that you find here. If you have any questions about this opportunity, you guys can always comment here or just email me, jesse@syncmymusic.com. As usual, if I accept your track, I need it within 48 hours, okay? Don't wait until the very end of the whole opportunity and like, oh yeah, I got to get you. No, you got to get me your stuff right away, because you never know. We've had situations where Library X said, hey, we need all the stuff you got right now because we got a client we got to pitch this to. I don't want to have to do a mad dash scramble at the very end getting everybody's track. So just get it to me right away as soon as possible, okay? Obviously, if your track is close, I'll help you get closer to being on the album. If your track is kind of far out there, your samples are missing, you're not in the right lane, your genre, you're not really matching the references, I'm going to tell you where you're sort of off and what you need to be thinking about and focusing on. And obviously, if your track is just good to go, I'm going to accept it right off the bat. So those are usually my 3 responses to those. And probably we'll do some homework assignments that might have something to do with this this opportunity. So if I see some common thing going on, some common errors or just missteps that people are taking, I will create some sort of homework assignments to help you guys hone in on those particular things that don't really work out so well in the short run. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. Best of luck. Get me your submissions as soon as possible. This one obviously just ends as soon as we've got 12 tracks, okay? We can go more than 12, but once we hit 12 and I feel good about it, I can cut it off right then and there. So don't wait. Don't sit on this and think, oh, I got to the end of the month. Get this stuff up as soon as possible. The sooner you can, the sooner I can go and get you guys feedback and let you know what you need to do to get on the album.